Hi everybody, I'm Lucky Craft Pro Kelly Jordan, and let's talk about the fall feed. What's the fall feed? That's when the fish put the feed bag on, getting ready to go into winter, and it can be one of the most awesome times of year to fish. The shad are going crazy and grouping up, typically in the mouths of creeks, backs of creeks. Everything is alive. The fish are just feeding like crazy because they know the winter is coming, and it's a beautiful time to be on the water. Typically you have more room to yourself because a lot of people don't fish in the bass fish in the fall, or they're out in the woods hunting. So it's a beautiful time of year, don't miss it. But there's a couple things that really can help you key in to catch a lot more fish in the fall. Now, there's two things that are going on. The shad are grouping up. There's huge population of the shad left over from the next spring. The shad that were spawned in late spring are now growing up and big enough for the bass to eat a lot of, and they're really ganged up. The water temperature is dropping. That's what causes those fish typically to migrate to the mouths and the back of some creeks, and that puts a lot of bass shallow. There's another bait fish, or bait item I guess you could say, that comes into play in the fall because there's a big push of fish shallow, and that's crawfish. So that's kind of like a 1-2 punch way to attack bass fishing in the fall. My favorite thing to throw in the fall when they're chasing shad is a Lucky Craft suspending jerkbait. So I have in my hand, this is the Slender Pointer 127. It's the biggest one of the Slender Pointer line, and then the 112. They're both pretty good size jerkbaits, have a really great action when you're trying to really power fish them, if that makes sense. You can really work these baits really quick, and they don't get too crazy. They don't dive too deep. They stay up pretty high in the water column, cover a lot of water, trigger some strikes, and again, the bass are actively chasing bait fish, shad in the fall. Then you find yourself in the creeks, mouths of creeks and back of creeks a lot of times, because that's where a lot of the shad go in the fall. And so the bass are right behind them, and then you run into a lot of shallow cover and rock, grass, wood, what have you, and the crawfish patterns come into play then as well. So it's kind of the 1-2 punch. Get your shad patterns with the jerkbait out there, then hit the hard targets with a Lucky Craft 1.0 and a 1.5. Crawfish imitation is perfect. Like I said, crawfish are out too. They're about to go in their wintertime dens, I guess. They're out there feeding up, and the bass know right where they are. Crawfish are high protein diets, and the big theory out there in bass fishermen is the big female bass love to feed on crawfish because of the high protein content of a crawfish. That helps develop their eggs for the next year, and that's why people think a lot of really big bass really key on crawfish before the spawn. That includes the late fall. So the 1.0, it's a little bit smaller than the 1.5. The 1.5 is of course the standard size square bill that we have. The 1.0 is a little bit smaller, and that's one thing that comes into play in the fall, is a lot of the bait fish and bait creatures or whatever are young of the year. They were spawned or hatched out in the spring or early summer of the year. They're now growing up and they get maturity, I guess they're not even a year old. A lot of times you can do really well by downsizing your bait, and that's where a 1.0 comes in. So go out there in the fall, have fun, catch a lot of fish, and make sure you have a Slender Pointer 127 and a 112 in the boat, shad patterns, and don't ever get out there without a Lucky Craft 1.5. And make sure you don't miss the 1.0 bite in the fall.